Well, good morning, YouTube. Back over at the shop today, and as you can see, I took a trip to Bryson City this morning to pick up the part, finally, that we needed to put Dr. Evil back together. Now, I say finally, but I've got to be completely honest. They called me a week ago this past Thursday. It's Saturday now, and the part was there. But what happened was after I ordered this part and they were going to ship it over to the Bryson City store to make my drive a little easier, I decided I wanted a second item. I wanted to order the factory OEM service manual for Dr. Evil. New bike, new technology. Thought it'd be a good idea, since I'm in the business, to have the proper torque specs and the proper service procedures for whatever it is I'm going to do on this bike in the future. So I called the next day or the day after, I don't remember exactly, and I ordered that. And so even though they called me last Thursday and said that this part was there, I was like, well, it shouldn't be a couple more days so the other part is there. And then I'll just go make one trip and pick them both up at the same time. Bryson City is a little bit over an hour away. So it's not that it's a long trip, but why not wait till both parts were there and go pick them both up? Well, as it turns out, the service manual never actually got ordered. So it didn't come in. And at this point, I was tired of waiting for the handlebar clamp. So I just made the choice to go this morning and pick it up even without the service manual. And as you can see, I bought a shop heater a couple of weeks ago. It has made all the difference when I've been over here doing some stuff. Even Talon's come over here and worked on his truck, and it's been kind of a lifesaver because we've had some pretty cold temperatures. Now today isn't terrible. It's in the mid 40s. And keep in mind, this building is not sealed. These windows that you see, one right there, there's no actual glass in them. They're just a steel mesh. And then there's like a paneling on the outside, and there's nothing stopping airflow in here. So this thing, I only let it run 10 or 15 minutes, and it brought the temperature up here a little bit. I don't have a thermometer in here to know exactly how much, but it's enough to take the edge off. In fact, I might even take off my flannel here in just a moment as we get started putting Dr. Evil back together. Unfortunately, it is way too noisy to continue running while we are recording. So just turn it on for a little bit, take the chill off, shut it back off, make videos. All right, so here we go. Old top clamp, new top clamp. The bolts should be shared, but this one should fit. As you can see, it's considerably smaller than the original. So let's get this thing put back together. So a couple of weeks ago when we started this project and I had installed the risers, put the bolts in, I'd already put some fresh, brand new red Loctite on there. Even though they're not torqued all the way, that Loctite is since dried up. So I think I'm going to pull them out, clean those bolts up again, put some new Loctite on it, and we'll start this procedure all over again. All right, so the torque specs I could find online show that it should be torqued between 30 and 40 foot-pounds, which is pretty much right about where I would have kind of felt it anyways. I think that feels right to me. But before I torqued them, what I did is I put the cap on and I ran the bolts down. Now, they're not torqued, but at least that way it should keep those risers straight so that we have less alignment issues when we go do the final install. All right, so now that it's all back together, we're gonna go ahead and reinstall the top clamp onto the forks and the steering stem, and then get everything put back together. Now I've come in here already with a microfiber and kind of pre-cleaned everything because it got a little dusty sitting here for the last 2 weeks. Made sure that, no debris was inside any of the bored out orifices or on the fork tubes themselves. Now this should just slide right back into place, pretty close. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of wiggling down there to get it to drop the rest of the way. So the whole time this has been apart, there has been a jack underneath the bike supporting the weight of the motorcycle. But without that top clamp in place, the forks might want to tweak just a little bit. So we're gonna have to wiggle it a little bit, just a little bit. Then that way we can get everything to line back up. Then we can preload our steering bearing before we torque down the pinch bolts on the top clamp. All right, just a quick little wiggle, and I was able to get that to drop right into place. So now we're gonna set the preload. All right, some fresh red Loctite on that. and we'll go to install it. Just spin it in by hand at first. Now, this is why I really wanted the service manual so I could verify some of these torque specs. But the best I could find is what you're supposed to do here is torque it down to 14 foot-pounds. And then, that's just to seat the bearing. Then you back it off, and then you retorque it to 7 foot-pounds. So we're gonna give that a try. All right, so I removed the pinch bolts for the top clamp, put a little Loctite on them. Now, none of these fasteners, including that stem bolt, had Loctite on them from the factory. But because I know how Harleys be, putting a little bit of blue on these before I torque them down. And I believe these get torqued about 14 foot-pounds or something like that. Let me go double check that spec. All right, so 14 would have been in spec. I believe it's between 13 and 17. I kind of prefer to go towards the higher end of the spec, so we're gonna go right straight to the 17. All right, with that fully reinstalled, double checking, making sure that the fork tubes are at the right height with and everything there looks good. So now time to start putting the wire harness back on, the ground wires, so on and so forth. Now there was this little plastic keeper here that those wire harnesses mount to, and they were just held down with a little push pins. So we're just gonna push pin them right back into place. There's one, and I gotta find my other push pin. I dropped it the other day, forgot to look for it. Found it. Elusive little sucker. It was laying right on top of the lift, but with it being black and the diamond plate texture on the top of this black lift, it was camouflage. I looked straight at it 3 or 4 times and never saw it there, but I found it. All right, so now we're gonna attach the ground wires. One goes to the top clamp, one goes to the bottom of the riser, and then this little dookie here bolts into the front of the riser. Same thing on the brake side, bolts into the front of that riser. Now that I've got those 2 little ground wires attached, I want to point something out that I think is kind of cool before we go and hook up the clutch cable and the brake hose holders. There's actually little tabs designed into the top clamp and the riser so that you can't over torque those grounds and get them to spin around. Pretty neat, I think. So here when you zoom in, you can see that little embossment that's designed in the top clamp, so that the terminal actually hits it when you snug this up. That way it doesn't twist it around, break the wires. And the same thing over here, there's a little embossment on the riser that stops you from screwing it up. All right, now that all that is back together, another neat note too, those little P-clamps that are holding the clutch cable and the brake line, just above the hole that actually mounts them to the riser, there's also a tab sticking off of them that fits into a hole in the riser, so you can't put them on wrong. I mean, I guess you can if you weren't paying attention, but it makes it really easy to remember how everything goes and how everything gets located and nothing twists there as well to keep it all looking clean and fresh in factory. So now the next step is to actually put the handlebars on, but I gotta fish the wires through the bars first. We'll throw them on there, plug them in, and then we'll adjust them. All right, so I fished the wires through the handlebars. Throttle side was a little bit more difficult because there's 2 plugs that go into here, where on this side there was only the one. But it's manageable. And then I went ahead and put the switch housings on. Not sure if that was easier off the bike. And what I mean by that is having the handlebars in the risers and snug down might have made that a whole lot easier, because as you're trying to line those switch housings up, get the plugs and get the wires routed properly, the bars are moving around on you. I thought I was making myself more efficient by doing it right here. I don't know that that was true. It might have been easier to mount them first. But anyway, it's done, so now let's get these bars on here. All right, top clamp is in place, but not fully torqued because I don't know that they're right where I want them. I want to get the clutch lever and everything else on. All the electrical connections hooked up and everything done. That'll be one of the last things we do, is making those final adjustments and torquing those down. All right, with everything back on, all that's left is adjustments and then putting on the dash nacelle. I did notice these bars must be considerably shorter because look at the extra slack I've got in these cables here, and I really can't push them through there to take them out. So I'm not real crazy about that. but they're on. Remember, this was just a test. All right, so now I've just refolded my moving blanket here so that my tank is still protected, but I've got room to get on the seat. That way I can sit on there and kind of position things the way I want, not just the handlebars rolling forward and back, but also the switch housings and levers rolling forward and back to get them where I think I want them, at least for the initial road test. And then I will put the nacelle back on after I take the bike off the lift, where I can turn the handlebars a little more. That'll make that a lot easier. And the very last piece to go on. There we go. All back together. However, I did notice one problem. When I turn the handlebar to the full left, my mirror is now hitting my windshield, so I'm gonna have to make a couple more adjustments. All right, guys, as you can see, it is all back together. Now, I let him sit here and run for a few minutes and checked all my switches and lights, and everything is working just fine, so I'm happy with that. The only thing that I'm a little unpleased with this whole process is I don't really care for the clutch cable and the brake hose routing. Because the other bars are a little bit taller, they took out some of that slack, and they got this kind of a weird bend in them. And I tried adjusting them differently, and I can't, at least not with leaving them attached to the mounting points that they're meant to be attached to. So I know this is just temporary. I know we're gonna do a different set of bars and risers at some point, but for right now, we really want to test see how this works. Unfortunately, the weather outside right now is not pleasant. So I can't take Dr. Evil for a test ride right at this moment, but I am excited. Hopefully in the next couple of days, I'll get a chance to and see if I like this bar setup any better than the other ones. So not too awfully bad for a 2-week-long project that really should have only taken about an hour, hour and a half. And seriously, guys, this was really easy. It should not have taken that long. Having to wait on that part was the only thing that really messed up the flow of this. Now, even though I haven't ridden it yet, just grabbing it and feeling it, it definitely feels like there's more rigidity. There's less flex in the handlebars. So that's definitely a good thing. Now I'm going to clean up my mess, put my tools away, and close this video out. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Until the next time I see you, keep those engines running.